It was supposed to be the perfect honeymoon. Sarah and Mark had been dreaming of their trip to Thailand for months: white sandy beaches, crystal clear waters, and luxurious resorts. But what started as a romantic getaway quickly turned into a nightmare they would never forget. On their third day in Thailand, they decided to explore a remote village recommended by a local guide. The village was nestled deep in the jungle, far from the tourist hotspots. The guide promised an authentic cultural experience, but what they found was anything but ordinary. As they arrived, the villagers greeted them with strange, almost forced smiles. The air was thick with the scent of incense, and the sound of distant drums echoed through the trees. Sarah felt uneasy, but Mark assured her it was just part of the local culture. That evening, the villagers invited them to a traditional ceremony. Reluctantly, Sarah agreed, not wanting to offend their hosts. They were led to a clearing in the jungle, where a large bonfire burned brightly. The villagers formed a circle around the fire, chanting in a language Sarah and Mark couldn't understand. Suddenly, the chanting stopped, and the villagers turned to face the couple. A man in a long, black robe stepped forward, holding a bowl filled with a dark, viscous liquid. He gestured for Sarah and Mark to drink from it. Mark, trying to be polite, took a small sip. Sarah hesitated, but the man's piercing gaze made her feel as though she had no choice. She took a sip as well. The liquid was bitter and metallic, and it burned her throat. As soon as they drank, the villagers began chanting again, louder and more fervently. The fire roared higher, and the ground beneath them seemed to tremble. Sarah felt dizzy, and her vision blurred. She reached for Mark, but he was no longer beside her. When she opened her eyes, she was lying on the ground in the middle of the circle. The villagers were gone, and the fire had died down to embers. Mark was nowhere to be seen. "Mark!" she screamed, her voice echoing through the jungle. There was no response. Sarah stumbled to her feet and began searching for Mark. The jungle was eerily silent, and the trees seemed to close in around her. She called out his name again and again, but the only sound she heard was the rustling of leaves. Finally, she found him. He was standing at the edge of a cliff, staring into the darkness below. "Mark," she cried, running toward him. He turned to face her, and her heart stopped. His eyes were completely black, and his face was twisted into a grotesque smile. "Sarah," he said, his voice distorted and unnatural. "You shouldn't have come here." Before she could react, he grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the edge of the cliff. Sarah struggled, but his grip was impossibly strong. "Mark, please," she begged. He leaned in close, his breath cold against her skin. "You're mine now," he whispered. With a final, desperate effort, Sarah broke free and ran. She didn't look back. She ran through the jungle, branches scratching her face and arms, until she finally reached the village. The villagers were waiting for her. They surrounded her, their eyes glowing in the dark. The man in the black robe stepped forward, holding the same bowl as before. "You cannot escape," he said. "You belong to us now." Sarah woke up in a hospital bed 3 days later. She had been found wandering the streets of a nearby town, delirious and covered in scratches. When she asked about Mark, the doctors told her there was no record of him ever being in Thailand. But Sarah knew the truth. Every night, she dreams of the jungle, of the villagers, and of Mark's black eyes. And every night, she hears his voice, whispering, "You're mine now."